Hello and welcome to this season's edition of the Art and Mind Village Chat. I'm Fred Johnson, artist in residence and community engagement specialist here at the Straz Center, and I am honored again this season to be joined by our co-host, Miss Susan Mag-Salmon, who is the executive director of the Art and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. Here we are again, Susan, another great season.
Amazing, just amazing. It's so wonderful to be here. And I have to say, you've added more paintings behind you this season, and I'm very happy to see that.
Well, I continue on that, my own sort of inner healing and exploration journey along with music. And so, it's been a really, really interesting year, needless to say, in so many, many ways, but specifically as it relates to art and science and healing. A lot of conversation has really, really amplified. And I can honestly say that our guest today is someone who, as long as I have been involved in a conversation about arts and health, especially here in Florida and here in the Tampa Bay area, her voice and her name has always been at the forefront. So we are really, really honored to have with us today, Miss Lynn Morris. Lynn is currently a professor of dance at University of South Florida in Tampa, but has held many, many roles in the evolution and exploration and development of this conversation about dance and health and healing and wholeness and the expansion and utilization of art for the health and well-being of those who are interested in being involved in it and just the world writ large. And so it's really an honor to have you with us, Lynn. Welcome to the Art and Mind Village Chat.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
As many of you all know, this conversation has been a progressive conversation that includes artists and includes scientists, science and research, and also includes the realm of kind of social consciousness, social justice, understanding how art and science work together to more fully define and remind us of the importance of this beautiful dance that we share, the importance of being able to really utilize creativity to awaken and enliven the best that we have to offer, the full measure of our being from the inside out, and how we deal in the world. So our past seasons have really brought forth information relative to that, and certainly wonderful conversations. And so this year, our goal here at the Art and Mind Village Chat and in the work and collaboration that we do with Johns Hopkins University is to take a more finite look at how do we actualize this? How do we really bring this knowingness now into a practical place? And Lynn, you have been doing that for such a very, very long time. So let's start out first by speaking to the artist. How did Lynn find her way to the world of dance?
Well, my parents were definitely big advocates of the arts, and my mother is a visual artist herself, and in the past, music and music has been a big part of her life. And so she put me into dance at an early age, and I seemed to really gravitate towards it. I had ended up having a lot of ballet training. I did like an aspect of like the structure of ballet, but I also really enjoyed the creativity of dance. So I really had a lot of training starting at an early age, and was around professional dance as well. So I was inspired to see where one could go with it and build skills, and and certainly was taken by the fantastical, almost magical elements of what dance could do in performance. Sometimes that was a bit contrasted with the nature of the training. And that's something that I've kind of, from a health perspective, I think I've worked to understand better and to bring together more. So because when I was younger, and I would see in sort of these beautiful, magical, creative productions that I was also a part of, but the training sometimes felt like sometimes it could feel a little stifling, but balletically. It was very it can get a little so focused on the technical side that that we kind of lose sight of what are we doing here? You know, what's actually going on here? It's communication, it's expression, and there's joy in that. And so I think that experience over time in my intensive training, which was very good training, but I did see some splits, you know, that I wanted to bring back. Where's the soul of the artist? Where's the heart in this? You know, is it all about finessing a line or finessing, you know, particular technical skill or feat? Where inside of that is the breathing, living artist, that's the creator too? Because in my training, it was all about someone giving me material and me reflecting it back to them without saying anything, without, you know, and yet I was making choices, but the performance artist piece of it was not necessarily the piece that was prioritized or stated as a prioritization. Instead, the kind of, you know, do this skill set was a little bit more of that prioritization. And I think that, you know, it needs to be flipped a little bit more, where we remember that we're artists. And so when I did my undergraduate work at USF as a dance major, I got exposed to other types of dance, first of all, like contemporary dance and, you know, modern. And I'd had little sprinklings of things along the way in jazz and tap and other kinds of things. So that was really helpful for me. So it wasn't just balletically oriented. But there at USF, I got exposed to choreography, and suddenly it just birthed this whole idea of like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a creator. I create ideas, I create things. And it just opened everything up for me. And I really flourished in being able to see dance in a bigger way in the undergraduate work. And then I, you know, later went on to graduate school as well, and continued later into doctoral work and deepening into the research area of dance as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Susan, I know that in the research work that you all have done, that there's been a fair amount of engagement with movement and dance. So as we sort of begin to move into this understanding of the health or the healing aspects, what are some of the unique elements or interesting conversations and revelations that have come in your engagement as a researcher in the science and working with the science community, specifically as it relates to dance?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate your insights. And I hadn't really thought about the dancer as a tool for a choreographer, as opposed to a creative as part of that choreography. And I think we sometimes don't think of that, because as a audience member, we look at the dancer as an artist, but sometimes the dancer is in service of someone else's vision. And I think that's a really interesting aspect, and that's idea of how do you bring your life, your soul, your ideas, your creative breath into a piece as a choreographer, or how do you do that as a non-professional who really is just bringing life force out through movement. And so really interesting conversation. I mean, we know so I should just say that the work that I do is real. I'm very interested in how all of these different ways of knowing can be translated with practitioners, with artists, with people that are working in healthcare or public health or other settings, youth all the way through older adults, and also intergenerationally. So I'm agnostic to the audience or the community that we're serving. It's really trying to understand how we think about the arts and understand them in ways that the artist understands intuitively, but we might not understand neurobiologically or from a mechanistic point of view or a structural point of view. So some of the things that I think we do know about dance is it's so powerful in connecting mind and body, right? It because of the motor connections that are immediately made, and how there's the nature of the way the limbic system is really engaged, and you're using sound, you're using movement, you're also oftentimes thinking about touch. And so there is a multi-sensory experience happening. So I think for the maker, there's huge transformation. And as the beholder, you're also getting that perspective taking and mirror neuron of empathy and understanding and emotion. You know, whether, as I said earlier, whether I actually knew the artist was channeling someone else's vision or breathing life into their own, as an audience member, I'm always so emotionally moved by dance. And I think dance does that because of the physicality of it, like nothing else. It's a very unique kind of art, whether it's jazz or modern or ballet. I also love what you said about line and technique. You know, like just some of us just dance because it feels good, right? It feels so good, but others really know the technique of dance, and that is so extraordinary. And I would imagine, I'd love to hear you talk more about how when you are so proficient and you're expressing emotion, that's an extraordinary talent. And I'd love to understand more about how that feels.
Mm-hmm. It is, I mean, it is certainly, I mean, I would say there is this sense of freedom, you know, in terms of being able to articulate through your body, you know, really articulate in a really clear and crisp and, you know, refined way what you're trying to express, you know. So there's a freedom in it. And yeah, I would say also an empowerment, you know, an empowered feeling where you recognize that you have a lot of, you know, built-in repertoire that you've worked on to sometimes people call it your arsenal, but to work with, that you have, you know, a broad array of paints to paint with, that so there's a kind of, again, freedom in the knowing of you have a lot of choice making that's an option for you. And, you know, over time, as you practice dance, you also understand, the more you train in it, what all your options are, just simply knowing what your option, because when you're an early dancer, even if you have a lot of good technique and all that, sometimes dancers don't realize all of the nuanced qualities they can use, and the specificity of, you know, fine motor movement that they can employ, and gestural movement, and small and larger gross motor movement to, you know, combine into these beautiful repertoires and communicate. So it is nice to refine that practice in a way that, you know, you have a lot to choose from in the creative process, and as a performer, it's like a crystallization.
Yeah, I talked to Pat Metheny, the jazz guitarist, about this a couple years ago, and I said, "What are you thinking about when you are playing like you play?" And he said, "I'm not thinking at all. I'm feeling." He said, "I don't have time to think. I'm so immersed in it." And that makes me think of Charles Lim's research on the difference between improvisation and practice. And if you play a piece that you've practiced, Charles shows that a certain part of the prefrontal cortex lights up, and you're very conscious of playing it properly. But when you're improvising, that part of the brain shuts down, and you're able to improv or go into that flow state, and all your knowledge comes forward, but it isn't it is implicit. It's part of your very being. And I can imagine that could translate to research, to dance, in the kind of research that he's done around that.
Yeah, and I mean, I teach dance improvisation, and I think improvisation is a wonderful tool where, you're right, those things are coming together, and these things are unfolding in time in a spontaneous way, where your kind of intention and your intuition are all coming together in this moment. And it's nice, you sort of, as it's happening, you're you know, understanding, you're seeing things come out that perhaps you weren't aware that were there. It's a beautiful process to certainly start also choreographic work and move in that direction. But yeah, I mean, dance is, you know, an embodied art form that that in which we're doing kinesthetic thinking, you know. So we're constantly, the thinking is coming through the movement in that sensorial way, you know.
I think
Yeah.
two threads that kind of guide us to the next layer of our conversation. One is when you were talking earlier, Mary Lynn, about, you know, kind of the technique, and then, you know, being able to create, you know, like the technician and the choreographer. I've had the great pleasure this last season at the Straz to work with Kelly King, who is a great contemporary dancer and choreographer, and works with our young folk. And one of the things that I always loved that she does is she'll create a piece, and, you know, she really kind of pushes them. I mean, technique is really important. She pushes
Right.
them, but also as they move through something, she'll then say, okay, now where does that guide you? You know, in other words, you know, here we are. What is your body telling you to do next? Which kind of, I think, begins to create that relationship between the creator and the technician, and, you know,
Right.
cracks open. For me, and I think for many people, when we watch dance, there's a part of us that, you know, I think we breathe in to understanding what the body can do. We want that language, you know. I think everybody would love to be able to express that language. You know, it's kind of a shared breath, which of course is the one thing that all humanity shares. And one of the amazing things about the work that you do is that sharing, or that desire to dance or be a part of that, is you really work to create a platform for everyone. I know that you are deeply involved in mixed abilities dance, and creating an opportunity for, you know, other ability folk to be able to do that. How did you kind of step into that consciousness, and you've taken it to an amazing place, especially for dance. And so, you know, talk about that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, historically and traditionally, you know, we can look at dance in the past and see that, and you know, and it continues today. The threads of it continue. We can see the types of bodies that were, you know, more supported to be in dance, or more privileged to be in dance, and the bodies that weren't, and the bodies that were trained, that were seen as trainable, let's say, you know. And so, you know, that sort of traditional historical process, you know, particularly if we look at ballet, but other forms too, you know, there was kind of a, let's say, a standard or an expectation of, like, this is what you look like as a dancer, and this is what you're supposed to be able to do. And of course, those things, you know, do evolve a bit over culture and time. But historically, you know, there's some precedents, and there's these threads that we can see. And so, you know, in that, sometimes individuals have been left out of dance experiences that they would have really benefited from, whether they were going to move towards a professional track or not. The fact that they would feel invited into a space with their body, with their uniqueness, and be able to explore movement, you know, again, is a very empowering thing. And why shouldn't, you know, everyone be included in those kinds of experiential things that bring, you know, healing, but also just confidence, and a number of other things. So I think that, you know, and I have to tie this to my family experience, because it certainly was an influence for me. I think that at a certain point, when I was practicing ballet specifically, which is a very precise, intricate, refined form, you know, there's a classical ballet, you know, the finger is supposed to be, it's very, in many ways, mathematical, I would say. You know, the foot is supposed to do a particular thing, the line is supposed to be a particular thing in classical ballet. And so things are very measured in that sense, and specific, and that's the nature of the aesthetic. But when I was 12, my father was injured in a really severe car accident, which left him with a significant brain injury that affected him physically. He had a seizure disorder and a lot of physical complications from it. So our family structure completely changed in that moment. My mom and I became caregivers, essentially, and we were on this journey then together, trying to figure out who is now our new family member, because it wasn't the same person that we knew before. And how do we move through that? Now, both of us happen to be artists. So it was kind of natural. My mom, one of the first things she was trying to do to help my dad regain some balance abilities, because he was in a coma for about a month, and the doctors actually did not expect him to survive the accident, but he did come out of it. And based on the brain injury that he had, it was very unusual that he had any motor capabilities, but indeed he did. So we felt very fortunate in that way. But from a brain perspective, from a person perspective, he was really quite different, and we navigated that then for 21 years. And at that time, there weren't also a lot of tools that we were given. So it was kind of like he came home from the hospital and we just figured it out in all these different ways. So I had that personal experience happening, which was very much about involving disability and, extraordinary life change. But at the same time, I had the consistency of dance and taking this balletic form, which was in my mind, at least as a young person, certainly in my mind, seemed to be about perfection of form. But that was quite different than what was happening in my family situation, where my dad's body went from, this kind of able-bodied norm to a kind of brokenness, a broken body, we could say. And so I think that somewhere in my child mind, I was probably trying to rectify a little bit of this extraordinary contrast, what I perceived as an extraordinary contrast between like perfection of these things that weren't sort of syncing with the family experience. And so I think I was honestly always drawn a bit to even outside of that particular family experience. I think I was always drawn to the notion of inclusion and kind of, how can we all work together? How can more people kind of come to this experience? I think I was always kind of drawn to that. I could see it in my other childhood experiences, working with some of the other children in the neighborhood of many different types, and we would all come together and we dance together, and we do dances on skates and everything. So I think it was always a seed for me. So in 2002, I ended up first seeing a performance of Dancing Wheels. And I had never seen a dancer in a wheelchair perform on a stage before, and it be frankly taken seriously as dance performance that was respected and validated as legitimate dance performance. And indeed, it was a beautiful performance, and it was fantastic. And so from there, I thought, oh my gosh, this world exists of actually professional dance. These individuals really, really pushing what we understand dance initially to be, that like you have to have legs and you have to move in particular ways and you have to have all this refined abilities. And I'm thinking, whoa, I just watched a performance where that wasn't the case at all. And it was quite stunning. So I think for me, it opened up a space where I said, wow, this is a different lens. This is a different lens to adopt, and I really like it. I really like this more inclusive lens that enables in different ways, still pushes towards training rigor. So not to say that we just go, oh, we don't care about artistic rigor or training rigor or anything like that, but we do. But that many different people can enter the space, and we can look at actually these different bodies as frankly moving the field forward. In really creative and innovative ways. So for me, it was exciting. And so I started exploring locally what I could do here. And I started connecting with a group here that was doing a little bit of that, and started teaching. And then I started mainly choreographing, actually, with dancers who were using wheelchairs. And that really started me thinking a lot about also the chair, the device, the assistive technology that they were using, and how important the assistive technology was as part of the creative art making. And so I was mainly working with dancers with physical disabilities at that time. And then a lot of things evolved from there. And I've stayed in that work for now a long time, doing a lot of things, including collaborating with Arts for All Florida, which is an arts and disability organization here, headquartered at USF, but does statewide programming in arts and disability.
Yeah. Well, let's take a moment now and take a look at a wonderful profile that was put together that talks about your work. I think it speaks so powerfully. So we'll take time to take a look at that now.
Thank you.
There's something very freeing about, basically having thoughts and ideas and human experiences that you can express through the physicality of your body. Freedom of expression, creating new movement possibilities, that's what we're always sort of exploring in dance. My creativity has always blossomed when I begin to work with physical objects outside the body. It's something about the relationship between the human person and the objects outside of that human body, especially working obviously with disability. My name is Lynn Morris, and I'm the assistant director of the dance program at the University of South Florida. There's a tendency with disability for folks to think of the tragedy or the challenge, and that's not where the emphasis should be. That to also recognize that there's a lot of innovative potential and there's a lot of opportunity. From a personal experience, my dad had a disability, pretty severe disability, had a brain injury. And so that kind of brought me into this more the world of disability. And then that experience has been layered with my work in the art world. In 2001, I started working with dancers with and without disabilities integrated. That's when I really started thinking of the wheelchair as a creative instrument, because the individuals I was working with had a lot of upper body mobility, and yet they were using manual wheelchair propulsion or they were using the joystick controlled wheelchair. So it's been a long evolution. Started with exploring seat adaptations on segways. Then later evolutions, as I worked with some other collaborators, moved into different places, and I began to sort of figure out for myself what the aesthetic of what I was trying to create was and why. I wanted the emphasis to be on the person and their movement, and a little different, a little unusual than I would typically identify as a wheelchair. My chair is different in two particular ways. One is the omnidirectionality. So the chair moves forward, backward, side, and diagonal directions and rotates and turns. The other thing is that the seat actually rotates independently from the base. So that's helpful for accessibility if you're talking about daily living, but also from dance, again, being able to actually spin the seat. It does have height change, and that again allows the individual to be at eye level, or in terms of dancing, it allows more change in the verticality. The other significant difference is the actual control system. So rather than it just being a joystick that's attached to the chair, my control system is a mobile control. So it's controlled through the smartphone. And so it can be held by the person in the chair. It can be worn by the person in the chair. So if you wear it, then when you lean forward, the chair moves forward. If you lean back, the chair moves back. If you lean to the side, the chair will move side. If you rotate this way, the chair will rotate. And the degree of movement, how far forward or how far back you lean or turn or twist, can all be programmed. The interesting thing, though, about this controller, which makes it just very different as offering another kind of possibility, is that you can have someone that's not physically engaged, not actually touching, the person, and they can yet be still controlling the chair through their movements, potentially their own movements. They could be dancing over here and controlling the movement of the person over here at a distance. There's this kind of empathy, there's an empathetic connection there. And so in some ways that it kind of embodies this idea that even though we're apart, we're actually still really affecting each other. I'm in dance, I'm a dancer, and I'm a dance creator, So the chair, I hope to use it in a dance context. But I've always kind of had my eye on the pedestrian aspect too, which is the sort of daily life aspect as well. So in the manual chair, you can't really talk to someone who's behind you. So in the case of my chair, wouldn't necessarily, for instance, have to be behind the chair pushing. People want to hold hands or connect physically a little bit with their bodies. You can connect hand to hand and simply walk together. So the chair is therefore sort of a blend of the sort of aesthetic, creative, and this kind of more functional, the sort of daily life aspect as well. I think that if it's more conducive for people to come together, to physically connect, and if it encourages that in some way, and certainly to dance together, that it heightens emotional connectivity. That's very exciting. I mean, that's very joyful.
Mary Lynn, it's just magnificent. I mean, I mean,
Beautiful.
this is like the fourth time that I've watched it, and it's just, it's what a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful coming together of a sense of how to empower and also to really celebrate the extension of one's ability to be able to share and create beauty together. It's just magnificent. I also know that on a real practical level too, in terms of actualizing, you've helped to develop a dance and medicine curriculum, right? So that this is these kinds of things and the understanding of the application of art for healing is a part of students' opportunity to begin to think about this now before they're out into the world and really get some certification that can allow them to take it to the next level, right?
I think my screen froze a little bit. I missed the very last thing that you said, I
Oh,
think.
okay. Well, welcome to the wonderful world of Zoom. You know, I was, we don't pretend that that kind of thing doesn't happen. I was talking specifically about the fact that along with this amazing understanding and this amazing gift that you bring, you know, for mixed ability creativity is also your curriculum that you've developed, the dance and medicine curriculum, so that it's really now a practical part of the conversation that dancers can really begin to understand and consider
Right.
how to utilize art for healing.
Mhm.
Want to talk about that a
Mhm.
little bit?
Yeah. I was just gonna say too, in reference to all of. Oh, yeah, and I was just gonna say, and also in reference to all of it, you know, the importance of collaboration. So while I did initiate the rolling dance chair project, and it was conceptually my ideas, and I approached engineers about it, you know, it's collaborative. So it's multiple forms of expertise coming together to make something happen. And I really believe in collaboration. I think when you have good collaborators working together, amazing things can happen. And I just want to honor the collaborative process and how useful and important that is to again bring artists to the table with scientists, which is what we're doing with art and health, right? That's just so important. And so in all of the work that I do, it is very much collaborative in that sense. And I'm bringing my movement perspectives, my movement expertise, and some also of my kinesiological knowledge and things like that to the table, my creative lens. But then what are the other things, and how are we intersecting? And so in the process of developing that prototype chair, you know, I certainly have consulted with individuals with disabilities. I've had individuals with disabilities test the chair, give me feedback, you know, and it has shaped the direction. And as to, you know, who is this really useful for? Who would really appreciate using it? Why? And this kind of thing. And that's been really helpful. And Brianna, who was in the video, she's actually was a student in Revolutions dance that I had worked with for some time, and I really appreciate that she was able to come out and work with the chair a little bit for that video. And then Dwayne Schuneman, you saw in the video, and we've appreciated collaborating over years as well, doing work together. So it's just it's important to recognize the way that collaboration really plays a role in all of our efforts. So with the Dance Medicine Science Certificate program that I initiated, again, it's housed within the dance program, but I went to other colleges and said, hey, I'm trying to shape this program. What courses from your department could we possibly, you know, put in this program that would be accessible to students, you know? And so that was also, you know, a bit collaborative in that nature. And it's a dance medicine science certificate program at the undergraduate level, and the kind of main focus of it was to allow dancers to pursue looking at issues of injury and dance wellness, health and wellness from a mental and physical standpoint for dancers, because that's kind of a large part of what the field is, but also to look at that other side. So dance for health as well. So to look at how dance is implemented in different populations and used in different ways, again, from this kind of healthful approach, or just in terms of community building, et cetera. So different ways that dance implements into a society beyond looking simply at also the dancer's needs and concerns from a medical or health perspective. So the students end up doing these very individualized projects, capstone projects that are research specific to their interest. So so we have some dancers looking at flooring, you know, we have some dancers looking at a particular injury like Achilles tendonitis, or looking at particular issues of knee biomechanics. But we also have dancers who are looking at issues of stress and anxiety, and you know, how dance can help one work through issues of anxiety and stress, or anxiety and depression. And so more coming from that like dance therapy perspective too. So looking at, so they had this opportunity to really explore an individualized project through that curriculum.
Is it a research-based program? They are interested in the topic and they have some way to study it in a different way of better understanding it?
Yes, so they take some foundational coursework, they take dance kinesiology, they take anatomy physiology, and some other basic more courses to kind of undergird their sort of scientific understanding. And then they take 2 research and dance classes actually with me, where they're guided through different research methodologies and introduced to different ways that they might approach a research project. And they do a literature review of the area that they're interested in, and kind of move that direction. And then they have a whole, after the 2 research courses, they do a research proposal, and then they have basically a full year or semester to implement the project and bring it to fruition with mentorship.
I'm always intrigued at how much curiosity drives research, right? Like they're interested in the field, they're passionate about it, they're driven to understand more. And I think sometimes we think of research as being so sterile, but in fact, it's really so curiosity driven, right? I have one question for you.
Right.
Which is amazing. Is that being manufactured for others to use, or are you still in the prototype stage?
It's still in the prototype stage. I'm working with an engineering programmer that I've worked with now for some years on it. We're doing another iteration from the programming perspective, so we wanted to refine that. And there's other kinds of upgrades we'd like to make, but also, over the years, I've had different partnerships with mobility companies, wheelchair companies like Pride Mobility, Quantum Mobility, some other like actually top industry partners. And like I was saying before, collaboration is so important. So for me right now, it's, you know, I'm a faculty member in a dance program and I'm a researcher. I'm not a production company or a product development company, right? So it's as far as where it can go, it's largely dependent on the evolution of what partnerships could emerge. Because I'm really at this point, I'm not quite sure what is possible there to move it out of a prototype stage. There'd have to be a licensing agreement and a partnership with a company that was interested. And that's sometimes when companies there's been an initial interest, but I think they see it as a really niche market. And so again, that kind of bottom line of, how many are we going to sell? That sort of thing is so as far as that piece of it, where is it going on a product level, or making it available and making it a robust device that's safe and all of that. At this point, from my research perspective, I've done some minimal choreography with it. And I've done testing, a lot of just movement experimentation with dancers with disabilities, with and without actually, because we're also exploring the interaction between multiple bodies, in relationship to creative mobility. So sometimes I just like to think of it as creative mobility, also not so much about, this is a wheelchair, because that kind of can limit the understanding of what it means for mobility to happen for all different types of body in creative ways. Because that's, again, what we do in dance, from aerial silks to, the Cirque du Soleil stages that move and, that's creative mobility. And it can be very much in service of diverse populations, but it also is in service of creativity at large. So
yeah.
Well, we continue to negotiate and collaborate with Mother Time, because it seems like the one thing we never quite have enough is time to really, really, really talk about this. And we can certainly talk about this a whole lot longer. Mary Lynn, thank you so very, very much. And I just go on record saying in terms of collaborations, we would not be who we are in terms of our advancement and understanding of art and health if it were not for Susan and her vision to really take us on this journey and guide us along and create a collaboration that empowers all of us. So our thanks to you for all that you do. We also want folk to know that Mary Lynn is also a really, really important member of our Arts and Mind Village chat creative team in terms of putting these programs together. And we're excited that we could start this season off with you. Susan, as always, thank you for continuing to take the journey with us. Lots of exciting things going on in your world too that we'll talk about in the coming weeks. Again, thanks to everyone who tunes in. Thank you for your most valuable commodity, and that's your time. Spread the word. Art heals, and there's science and research to quantify that. And if that's not enough, those of us who do this will keep making it, and inspiring you to recognize that it's a really important part of who we are as individuals and as a community and as a world. So on behalf of Johns Hopkins University and the Straz Center for the Performing Arts, again, Mary Lynn, thank you. And until next time, take care, everybody.
Thank you, Fred.